time. So I'm getting COVID vibes all over again during the beginning of my tenure. That was what we dealt with every month. So as I'll remind you, please don't type anything into the chat unless you are requesting help as a commissioner or if you're providing information as a presenter. This is a public meeting and everything has to be spoken verbally for the record. Commissioners ask that you just keep your cameras on to the extent possible. And if you have a question or would like to be recognized, please raise your hand via the video platform and I will call on you. I used to have a whole spiel that I would go through and I don't have it anymore. So if I'm forgetting things, I apologize. And I hope you'll bear with me as I muddle through a cold here today. But let's get started. So here today we have Andrew, Griffin, Hewitt, Kristen, John, and myself as far as commissioners so far. So we have quorum. First agenda item will be public comments. Rolda, I'm unaware if any public comment was scheduled ahead of time, but
no, no one has signed up.
Okay, so if you're here for public comment, would you just please raise your hand or say something, and we'll give you an opportunity to speak. Okay, hearing none, I will move forward to our next agenda item, which is the approval of the April meeting minutes. Commissioners, are there any revisions to the meeting minutes?
Not from me.
Okay, in that case, can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Can I get a second? Okay, thank you, Andrew. Any opposed to the approval of the meeting minutes from April? All right, hearing none, the motion passes and the meeting minutes are approved. That brings us to our next agenda item, which is the approval of the Red Lion relocation plan. Folks from Red Lion, feel free to say a few words here at the top if you've got some comments for us.
Yeah, Nick Cummings with Walsh Colucci here on behalf of Orr Partners. Tyler Orr is with me, and he can give you a real brief update on how everything's been going with relocation so far. And I think that's really all that we've got to say, but it's been going well, and he's got a good status report. So go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, so I'm pleased to present. It has been going very well, as Nick has said. We've already had 3 people move out so far. And out of the 7 people that qualify for the TAF, 6 have been approved and 1 is still in process. And we are currently holding a place for them at Park Georgetown. So the process is going really well and it's been a great success so far.
That's great to hear. Any other updates from your team before we move to commissioner questions and comments?
No, we're ready for questions if there are any. Go ahead.
Great. As I recall, we were really pleased with the efforts that you guys made during our last meeting, and I think we had, if there were any comments, we had either submitted them to Hector or they were resolved during the meeting itself. But commissioners, if there's anything left here before we make a final vote, now is your chance to ask questions or provide comments.
I just want to agree. I thought that they did a great presentation.
Thank you.
Seem totally on top of what needs to be done to take care of your residents.
Between Orr Partners and Van Meter, it's a pleasure to work with such professionals. I mean, they're good at what they do. And Orr in particular is a relatively smaller company that's local and cares a lot. So it's good.
Yeah, and one more thing, just from my end to echo that I appreciated that a number of residents came to the meeting and had some questions that we were able to get resolved, most of them right on the spot or, within a short time after the meeting. And I thought that was fantastic. So with that, I will ask for a motion to approve Hector, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that they shouldn't have started the relocation until the 120-day notices were given, but given the fact that they are giving an extra incentive for tenants to move before, they're working on the relocation in a better way. So that was my comment. But the steps are the relocation plan is approved first, and then they can start the relocation. The fact that it's going before, it's a little tricky, but it's working. So that was my comment.
Okay, that's helpful to know, Hector. Appreciate that and all of your work on the relocation plan. Anything else before we move to the vote? All right, can I get a motion to approve the relocation plan for Red Lion?
I move to approve the motion.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, and I'm just going to go around the horn and ask for yay or nay. Andrew?
Yes.
Griffin?
Yes.
Kirit?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I also vote in favor, so the motion passes. Thank you very much, Tyler and Nick, for your time, and we look forward to seeing the final product after you guys have a chance to renovate the building.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna see
We can't wait to build it and get these people back in the building when it's done.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
see it every day on my drive to work, and I can't wait to see that instead of the old Red Lion Hotel. That whole stretch needs improvement, and we're glad to do it in a way that's also helping the community. So
Fantastic. All right, if there's nothing else on that, then we will move along to our next agenda item. And that is subcommittee updates. So let's see. Andrew, let's start with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so the meeting went well. We met with Eric Tamar, and our commissioners had a lot of questions for him regarding the housing process and the grants and how compliance issues are dealt with. There was definitely a lot of questions we'll definitely have for his counterparts, Jay White and Rhoda. Forget me who Jay's counterpart is in the other department.
A gentleman by the name of Russell. I didn't get his entire name. It doesn't come to my mind right now, but it's Russell from, he is the inspector in the voucher program, housing choice voucher program.
So we'll look forward to meeting with them in June. We won't be meeting this month, but since our typical meeting date falls on Memorial Day, so in observation of Memorial Day, we won't be meeting this month.
Okay. Great. Any other updates from you, Andrew, or anyone else on that subcommittee?
Anyone else who's there, feel free to add more.
Okay. Any other updates related to subcommittee? The other subcommittee at all? I'm not sure that they met this month. And if not, I'll move right along to our last agenda item. Actually, I see it's not technically on the agenda, but commissioners, as you know, the county board promulgated a new draft advisory groups handbook. And oh yeah, this is a great summary. Fantastic. I didn't know we had slides. Is there someone here to present on it, or?
No, it was just I believe this is what you saw, or this is what you
Yeah.
had at the meeting that you attended. So we just
Yeah.
happened to get a hold of it. So these are,
Okay.
this is a summary, pretty much.
Great. Well, so commissioners, to the extent that you had a chance to review this ahead of time, I'll just speak for myself and say, and I think some other commissions raised some questions about some of the draft changes. There are some changes that I think are unduly harsh or restrictive, and at the way that I understand them, I don't believe that they should probably pass in the current form. So let's just go through the summary really quick, and then I'll talk about some of my concerns, and then we can have a conversation about what we'd like to do, because County Board is seeking feedback here. And I think it would be good for us to provide some. All right, the first one is that all meeting bodies have to adopt an electronic participation policy at least once annually by recorded vote. And they provided a template very kindly. I don't have any particular problem with this, although maybe a touch bureaucratic and unnecessary. The next is that meeting bodies may hold all virtual meetings 2 times per calendar year, or 50% of meetings, whichever is greater. No consecutive all virtual meetings, and no change to individual participation requirements. Rhoda, I think this doesn't really affect us because we've been acting in accordance essentially with this already. Am I mistaken on that?
No, that's actually true. Yeah, we have been following this, just at about 2 meetings, but I noticed of 50% of the meetings. It seems greater if we were to do 50%, because we have what, maybe 9 meetings now, maybe for the year, 10 maybe. So if it's 50%, that would give us 5. So which is, yeah, that's kind of news to me. But we have been honoring a 25%. So we've been doing 2 meetings for the year, but
Right. So there, again, I don't have any strong feelings on it. The next one, however, I think is a little bit unduly restrictive. The public has to see us for the entirety of the meeting, and that means participation with cameras on for the full meeting. And if a member is not visible for any reason, turns camera off, leaves camera technical issue, or their audio communication fails, the member will be marked absent during that portion of the meeting. I understand, I suppose, the impetus behind that. And as many of you who were here during the COVID years know, I always want commissioners, to the extent possible, to be on video. But I don't think that adding additional absences, I suppose, which I don't really know whether they would have any effect due to like a technical issue or turning the camera off if you've spilled some coffee on yourself. I don't really see how that serves the public interest. And frankly, we all have bad hair days, so we meet virtually seldom enough as it is, as we talked about in the last one. So I would generally be in opposition to this.
I concur, David, because what happens if you have to use the restroom?
I don't know.
In person, you would be counted as absent. You would just be gone from the meeting for those 4 or 5 minutes you're out of the room.
Yeah, it's.
Are you taking comments on these now? I
Oh yeah, yeah. We're having a conversation. I'm just rolling through one by one.
So the previous one, that's the one I really have a problem with, the no change to individual participation requirements. Because to me, it doesn't make sense, because we allow members of the public and presenters to appear on camera or virtually, even when we're present at in-person meetings. but then we we cannot be virtual at those meetings because of the quorum requirement. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. We allow people to participate in our meetings virtually, but commissioners have a certain requirement where they can't. So it's either one or the other. It doesn't make any sense to me that why there's a quorum requirement in person or not.
That's a fair point. And I think but that's currently how it is. Am I mistaken on that, Rhoda?
No, there's no change. An in-person quorum is required in
Right.
order to have the meeting.
But I mean, I generally agree with you, Kirit. And so frankly, as long as we're collecting things to pass along to the county board and provide our advice on, I would suggest us discussing voting on asking to rescind that requirement. I think that we should be able to meet quorum if somebody is calling in over the phone or on video. We have enough difficulties meeting quorum, and I don't really see what the difference between having somebody on video versus in person functionally is. So I'll mark that down for part of our vote later. Any other thoughts on that one?
The only thing I could think of is just access, so you're not just a virtual person. Maybe there's a bottom, like if you drop below a third of the committee that's not in person, therefore you can't conduct any business. Because I feel like it's 2024, we should be able to conduct virtual meetings, but I understand the access to your public officials angle of that requirement.
Okay.
Maybe
Yeah.
if there's a bottom, rather than an all or nothing draconian that I can understand if it's just one person in person, like if David is just you and Rhoda in the county building and then the rest of us are virtual. I can understand there's an access issue there.
So maybe what you're suggesting is at least 30%, like for in-person meetings, at least 30% quorum, but not counting against. Yeah,
I think it was the meeting where Kirit was stuck in the airport because of the weather. We had 5 members present. We should have been, and then Kirit wouldn't be made quorum. We should have been able to conduct business, but we were talking about New Year's resolutions instead. So that's all.
It was a fun meeting, though.
It was. It was a great way to get to know everyone, but like we could have done the business. And and we were definitely above a third of the committee present. We were essentially at 45%.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I've got that written down, so we'll circle back around. I'm just making a list for now. So the video requirements, and then these the caregiver requirements and the members that meet the definition of a caregiver, I have no problem with. I think what we want from these changes is to encourage participation as broadly as possible. And in cases where someone's a caregiver in this definition, it allows them to meet remotely and count towards quorum. So this is something that I'd be in support of.
I think it's important to support, because it sort of goes to oftentimes the underserved community might be a disabled person or an elderly person who needs help, and forcing them to come in may keep them from voicing their opinion and concerns.
Yeah, totally. And I think that people may not think that they can participate in something like the TLC or another advisory body because of restrictions due to their status here, and this just is common sense to me. So
right.
Any other thoughts on that one? Great. Rhoda, are there other slides here? Okay.
No, actually, this is this is what was
all right. Well, I've got a few others.
Okay. Hector, you can get rid of that.
Number Number 12, communicating with the media. The draft says that chairs, members, or staff liaisons have to inform the county board and Office of Community and Public Engagement when media inquiries are received and before any action is taken. There's a few other words in that, but the gist is essentially that if someone from the media, like Arl now, contacts any of us here, we have to functionally, the way that I read it, go through the county board and the Office of Community and Public Engagement before we speak to them or provide comments. And frankly, I'm not fully convinced that that is not a violation of the First Amendment, but putting that aside, I don't understand the impetus here to restrict speech in this way. What are we saying? Like, you have to run these things by us every time Arl Now or the local media contacts you for comment on an issue. They say to you, we're going to press in 45 minutes. What are you going to do? Call up the county board, on a Saturday? That makes no sense to me. And I don't really see like a legitimate public purpose being served there. Any thoughts on that one?
Yep, I have thought.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I hate to be framed as an opposition to the First Amendment, but I generally like policies that direct communication through one person. And it looks like this policy would be designating the chair as the general spokesperson for the committee. I don't know. It seems reasonable as someone who works for an organization that you have a communication staff and you run stuff by them to make sure you're following stuff from the county. I don't necessarily know that I would be confident speaking on behalf of the TLC without, or would want to speak on behalf of the TLC without letting you know, David, and then honestly talking to someone from the county to make sure that I'm in line with, what they're saying. I don't want to get anything wrong. So that's just my thought on that. This seems pretty standard to me, but I would love to hear other people's thoughts.
Anyone else?
I think unfortunately, it'll always come down to what's the question.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, are they asking for my opinion, or are they asking for the commission's opinion? Am I speaking for myself, or am I speaking for the commission? Because the reality is that we're not all going to always agree. And so if it's just what's my opinion, I should say it. But if I'm representing the commission, I agree with you 100%, Sarah. It's got to come from David.
Well, and I think they make that clear in the policy too, that you have to say when you're speaking on behalf of yourself and not the group. So I think that's built into the draft here.
Yeah,
and
it's on the next page.
Yeah,
I think part of the concern for the county probably is they don't know how that's all going to be framed too. So they want to make sure that if it sounds like it's coming from the Arlington County TLC, if it's framed that way in the media, it sounds as if that opinion or that thought is de facto kind of endorsed by the county board, which isn't necessarily the case. That's my guess of what they're trying to get at here, is to make sure that any statement that's given by us on behalf of the TLC isn't necessarily framed as being represented by the county itself.
Anyone else? So, I mean, I'll grant that I think that the distinction speaking for yourself versus speaking for or on behalf of the TLC is an important one. So I don't have any disagreement with you there. But I do think this scenario that I outlined where you're asked for a comment and you are also someone who has knowledge on an issue and you're speaking your personal capacity, I don't see why that should be restricted by the county. So maybe there's a middle path here where we can point out that aspect, at least personally, where I disagree, while acknowledging that there should be some training or some requirement that you let the press know and ask them to specify that you're speaking on behalf of yourself or the TLC. Is that, I see some heads nodding. Does that sound like a reasonable compromise here?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
I concur.
All right. All right, so there's also a revision to the subcommittee creation, which just essentially creates an extra step for advisory bodies like ours to create subcommittees. We have to go and get directly the approval of the county board liaison and specifically consider staff support about creating new subcommittees, which to me seems like an unnecessary sort of bureaucratic step. I don't do, like, we're here to serve the county board, but we're not beholden to create or not create a subcommittee at their whim. I don't really see why that we would give that power away. Go ahead, Andrew.
I feel like that's maybe there's another commission that maybe it's proliferating subcommittees, which is creating a burden on staff. And I feel like this is just a one fix all problem, but trying to that's what I'm gathering, because I'm also a staff liaison at my job as well. I just have 2 statutory standing committees, and then anything else has to expire at the end of the year. So maybe switch over to that model. Like if it's not one of the a standing committee, then it has a shelf life, rather than it just being an ongoing, like you're managing 5 or 6 committees. That's a lot, especially for volunteer leadership. So switching over to like December 31st, if you didn't complete the work, file the work, and then if the new class of commissioners wishes to keep it up, then they can vote to reconstitute it.
Okay. Anyone
I think
else thoughts on this?
I think it's, as somebody who's involved in one of the early subcommittees, I think maybe more Hector or Rhoda can speak on it, because there's because of the involvement of the public and notice to the public, staff has to be minimally involved, at least to send out the notice. And now that we're having meetings in person, to get the room for the meeting, and so there is a requirement for staff for these meetings.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to overburden staff. Although like Andrew said, it sounds like this is something that's not targeted at us. We have 2 subcommittees, and as long as I've been here, I think we've only had 1 or 2 at a given time. I don't think that's an undue burden, but it does rankle me a little bit to think that I would have to go through steps, especially since I think that our charter pretty clearly says we have the ability to create subcommittees without consulting anyone.
Well, and
I mean,
then also, David, it would be doing the public a disservice, because if we have to wait for that approval, you could be delaying the start of the subcommittee. So it could sometimes take 2 to 3 months in order for the commission to get its works underway.
And what happens if the county board disapproves because they don't like I mean, we're sort of like dodging around the biggest issue, in my opinion, which is that should the county board have a say about what we are trying to figure out to provide them advice on? They already have a veto over every piece of advice we provide them.
True.
Maybe there's a minimum, like if you have more than 2, you have to seek approval. That's the only thing I'm thinking of. There's probably some commission out there that has 4 or 5 subcommittees going.
Yeah.
And it's becoming, and I understand it's a burden on staff because that's a lot
Yeah.
of time. And staff also has like a work-life balance. I'm sure after 5 o'clock, Rhoda and Hector just want to go home and relax and decompress.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what I think the origin of the problem is some other commission that's the agitator in this situation.
I think I like your idea there where, you know, you get 2 or 3 free subcommittees and then, you know, you have to lose one or to gain another or something like that. And I don't really care what the number is as long as it's over 2 or 3 because that's what we have. But I don't know how other, you know, commissions will feel about this. I think that I would be in favor of some sort of like middle ground that avoids stressing county resources unduly, but doesn't provide the county board veto power over the proposed scope of a subcommittee. You know, it says it right there in that footnote.
I have a question to Rhoda and Hector. You know, in your experience working with other staff, have you heard about these commissions that are having way too many subcommittees? And then the sort of secondary question is, there's nothing worse than, you know, having a party and nobody comes. And so could it also be that you set up all these subcommittees and we're all volunteers, and then, you know, staff does all this work to get ready, send it out there, and then we don't hit quorum, which has happened even in our small group. Just sort of what's the feel from Hector and Rhoda?
So we currently have 2 other commissions within the housing division. One is the Housing Commission and the other one is the Community Development Citizen Advisory Committee. That one has no subcommittees. If they do, they would have an ad hoc subcommittee formed for a specific purpose, and then it's disbanded, as they did for review of the NOFA. So, you know, that particular commission, not so much so. The Housing Commission in the past has had several subcommittees. Presently, I think they are at a minimum maybe of 1 or 2. So I don't know that, so I'm not sure of the core, the load, you know, in terms of how much work is required by staff to handle the subcommittees that currently exist there. So I don't know, you know, where this particular restriction, if you will, or, you know, this line of thought is coming from. So we couldn't speak to that from the commissions that we have in Housing Commission. You know, maybe others, Planning Commission, you know, those larger commissions maybe.
So maybe we ask that the county board just take a closer look at this and, you know, grant each commission at least a couple subcommittees that they can create at will, and then maybe tone down the language about approval based on scope. Like if it's really about strain on county resources, there shouldn't be any language that suggests that the county board should have a say over the proposed scope of a subcommittee. I mean, this may be happening. I mean, I don't think it's really happening here at TLC. This may be happening elsewhere, but the things that we talk about, I think, are pretty firmly within the scope of our charter. And I've never really heard anything to the contrary there, but okay, so let's move on to the next one, and we'll come back to the full list and have a discussion at the end. One of the other chairs pointed out that the engagement with other advisory group language is a little bit vague. That's number 11, and it suggests like it may be limiting the engagement between advisory groups, you know, and they say the following ways: work with the staff liaison to coordinate issues and agendas, as appropriate. And the concern that I heard from another commissioner, another chair, was that it may be de facto limiting chairs and other members from coordinating with other commissions without their liaison in between. And if that is the case, that would be a little bit concerning to me. I'm regularly in contact with other chairs of other commissions and other members, and I don't think I should have to coordinate through ROLDA. Talk about strain on staff resources. I should just be able to call up people when there's a common issue that we'd like to talk about. And I don't really see the value in limiting it in that way. Now, that's not necessarily what they intended, but the language does give me a little bit of pause as well.
David, I also want to raise on the bullet point regarding the liaison to a related group. From my experience, that doesn't really, liaisons have not been a great conduit of information. From my personal experience, professional experience, I should say, from in my job, like that's an ongoing conversation. All these groups have liaisons and they don't know what they're doing, and they're not collaborating. They're not showing up to the meetings. They're just reading the minutes and reporting out, and then that's it. So I feel like that's, if it's already being done chair to chair, I don't understand the need for a member level liaison, a commissioner to commissioner. If it's already, it's redundancy.
Yeah. The way I'm writing this down is no liaison intermediary, if that's what's implied here.
Yeah, because it's usually the chair or the vice chair that are probably the most informed on the topic or the matter. And yes, they can designate someone if there is a subject matter expert, but I would say defer to the chair if they so choose to designate someone else to serve in that capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. Any other thoughts on that one?
So the bullet number 3 here, which is appointing a member as a liaison, I can give a couple of examples. One example was Kristen, who was, the commissioner agreed that she would represent the TLC on what was supposed to have been the Fort Henry project with AHC, which eventually, got put on hold. So she was actually, if you will, appointed is not the right word, but she was selected to represent the TLC at, I think it was a planning commission, site plan subcommittee. So that's an example. Another example is having a TLC member be a member of the Community Development Citizen Advisory Committee. That is something that is open, has been open for a while. So, I mean, there are instances where a member of the commission could be, recommended as a member on another commission, and so they bring information back to the TLC. So that's fairly common.
I've always.
Are you saying that that's not?
No. I've always appreciated that process. I thought that it was good in terms of formalizing, like if you're getting reports from SIDSAC, that it's one person who's regularly attending their meetings.
Right.
What I'm talking about here is if the Housing Commission chair reaches out to me, does there have to be a liaison in between? And I can't see a world where that is efficient or useful. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. No. Okay. I'm just wanting to point out 3 as an example of some communication between and having another person do so, not just.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think that's something that we should be taking a closer look at, and if there are willing members to go to SIDSAC or Housing Commission, I think that would be highly beneficial. All right. A few more. Let's see. Oh, I think we generally do this already, but it's one of those with 12, you know, the chair must request information from other departments and agencies through their staff liaison. I don't, I think that's almost always how we do it here at TLC. So I'm not necessarily opposed here, but it does seem like an unnecessary formalization of a process. Now, maybe it's something that's being abused in other commissions, but that's something that I've got a slight concern about. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
Rhoda, is that the current process? Do you go to the county manager regarding staff resources? Or do you just go to your housing director?
Right. So I will go to housing director, my supervisor, and housing director. It really depends on the scope, but they're informed. Supervisors certainly informed that this is happening. And yes, if there is, you know, any concern for the use of staff resources, well, then we will have that conversation at that level. So it's at the level of supervisor and housing and director.
So for you, it would be a change, even if it isn't necessarily a change for us. Is that
so I don't see the county manager in the, well, ultimate decisions about coordinating staff. Yeah, I think we are talking about different scopes of
Yeah.
requesting information, and depending on what it is and what is involved in terms of resources, I will see this happening. But again, this conversation will take place between supervisors and at the the director level, if warranted.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it sounds like it is generally just how the way it's done already.
Yes.
And the county manager language, talks about ultimate decisions. So fine, like we already don't have control over staff resources anyway. So I don't really have a huge concern there. 13 is external communications. And it says that unless explicitly prescribed by the group's charter or other governing ordinance, members are prohibited from communicating or coordinating with other federal, state, or local agencies or governing bodies on behalf of the advisory group or the county without explicit approval from the county board. This is like, I can't say that I've ever been in a situation like this where I would need to coordinate with like a federal body in some way. And of course, I think like before committing to anything actively, like resource wise, I'm struggling just to think of like a situation where this might arise or affect us. But I tend to, as you may sense here, I tend to be rankled by the blanket prohibitions. I just don't understand. I don't understand why we're being so like restrictive about all this.
Like Andrew was saying earlier, this is not a problem that I don't know where these are coming from. This definitely does not affect our commission. I can't think of us.
Yeah.
I can't think of us ever doing this.
Okay. Right.
Has anything ever come up in the commission where like something in Alexandria or Fairfax had been referenced that
that's a good
wanted
point,
more information on?
That's a good point, because occasionally we've coordinated with the equivalent of the Tenant Landlord Commission in Alexandria. We've had a joint meeting with them in the past. I think it's been a few years.
Yeah, this seems to completely bar that, even just correspondence of like, if we wanted to request information or even reach out to them, this seems very draconian in the restrictions there.
Yeah, you're right. On further consideration, I think this is something that feels like an unnecessary bureaucratic step that may be appropriate for some commission out there that I'm unaware of that is like going rogue in every way, but maybe not for us. So I think that would probably be something to push back on.
Well, I guess, David, another scenario could be you could be asked in your personal capacity because of your expertise as the chair of the TLC to attend an Alexandria meeting, but knowing that you're there in your personal capacity, would this prohibit you from going and even receiving that invitation from the chair of the Alexandria TLC?
I think that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. And I think that's part of my problem with a number of these is that they seem crafted for some unknown subcommittee or unknown commission out there that, but they tend to be like all elbows rather than, more finely tuned. So here, I think that was the last one that I had issue with. Before we move on to like a broader conversation on this and what we might do about it, were there any other aspects of the draft that other commissioners had issues with or liked? Maybe we could like it as well. Okay. My understanding is that a number of other commissions are going to push back on this. I would suggest, just based on this conversation, that there are a number of things that it seems like most of us agree that we should at least push back on or suggest some middle ground with. What I have done in the past is drafted a letter, and do you know what, Roldo, do you know what the timeline is on the approval for this or when they require feedback?
So we actually don't. As a matter of fact, staff really has not had a chance to discuss this as yet. This is very new. So
Well,
we don't have any instructions on what is the timeline for this.
If there's no immediate deadline, then my suggestion is that we put together, I'll take on the responsibility of putting together this list that I've compiled here, and I'll distribute it to commissioners. I'd like to make an official request from staff for their perspective. If there are any things that Hector or Rolda believe are something that we should consider including in a letter to the county board with revisions, I'd ask for their perspective as the experts and as people who this impacts directly as well. And then we can meet next next month with language that is more fleshed out, and that everyone's had some more time to deliberate over and prepare a final letter to the county board with those with that advice. Does that sound like an agreeable strategy to everyone? Rolda, are you? Yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was going to ask Rolda, what does she think?
I was going to ask her.
Yeah, certainly. Once we have a discussion amongst the other staff liaisons, staff liaisons. Yeah, whatever comments come out of that meeting, we can certainly share with TLC. Yeah.
Okay. And can we have that by the upcoming meeting next month?
Yes, let me check to see when next we meet, and I will let the others know when we could have that conversation. Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, if a deadline does become clear, just let me know and I'll let the commission know. But I think that's the remainder of our business. unless people have further comments here that we haven't gotten to yet. Okay, good. Anything from staff? Rhoda?
So yes, I did want to share that we are having a, I hope I have it here, yes. I will set that up in the chat, I guess. We're having a tenant landlord summit again this year. We're having it the second year. It's taking place June 8th, Saturday morning, 10 to 2. We're having the sections of overall CAF information on how to access information concerning housing. The Department of Human Services will have an entire section on many of their programs, including their rental subsidy programs, in addition to other programs that they have. There may be a piece on eviction prevention as well. And then we also have the Legal Services of Northern Virginia will be doing an entire session on rights and responsibilities of tenants. So the different stages of the lease, you know, when you first begin, during your tenancy, and then at the end of the lease, you know, what you need to be aware of. And so that session it's generally the meat off, but all those 3 sessions together will form a substantial part of that. And then we also have a property maintenance session. So, you know, how do you make requests to your property management company, and at what point do you contact the county for assistance? So that would be on Saturday, June 8th. I have a flyer. I'd love for you to share it as widely as possible. And yeah, and also, David, an invitation is extended to you to do opening remarks, and or certainly everyone to attend.
I'm sorry, I almost sneezed there, but I avoided it. That sounds fantastic. I have already put it on my calendar, and looks like I'm open that day, so I plan on attending. I'd love to have other commissioners there. Rolda, if you would send the flyer to the commission right after the meeting, that'd be great, so I could get the details locked in. And great. Anything else from you, Rolda or Hector?
I don't have anything else. Yeah, I don't have anything else for now.
Okay. Anything else from commissioners? All right. Well, thank you for an efficient meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Can I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any opposed? Hearing none, this concludes the May 8th, 2024 meeting of the Tenant Landlord Commission. Thank you much for your attendance, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Yes,
Good night, everybody.
Enjoy your Memorial